Jim Harbaugh watch continues. And honestly, we're going to continue this kind of watch, quite frankly, until we get something concrete as to where he's headed next. Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons. Transparently, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. I haven't really been able to have anything to cheer about for some time now, but if you had to ask me what my favorite NFL franchise was, I would say the Falcons. As a Falcons fan, I was like, that would be awesome. I would love if they landed Jim Harbaugh. As a college football fan, which of course supersedes my NFL fanhood, I was like, dang, more smoke to the fire. More smoke to the fire. Now, to be clear, I think Jim Harbaugh would love the varsity. Those of y'all that know the varsity, my Atlanta people, you know what I'm talking about. Blue-collar operation, gritty, lunch pail, hard hat kind of deal over there. A lot of energy, though, and enthusiasm unknown to mankind at the varsity. So Jim Harbaugh, should he end up there, I mean, I think it's a sponsorship deal made in heaven. But here's what I want us to talk about when it comes to him taking yet another interview at the NFL level. Interview with the Chargers, now interview with the Falcons. We'll get to his contract with Michigan here in a second, but here's what this tells me. This interview, taking another interview, tells me there's not just interest for Jim Harbaugh, there is true desire. Like, interest is taking a phone call. Interest is having one interview. To take multiple interviews in that same number of days tells me there's the desire for him to find the right fit. Like, he's actively seeking out the next destination for himself. So does he end up taking one of these jobs? Is it the right fit? I think that still remains to be seen. There's this wide-ranging thought that the Chargers are the better fit, and I'm not here to jump into the NFL side of things, but just for Jim Harbaugh, again, there's more smoke. There's more of an effort on his side of things after he signed Don Yee as his agent, who has deep NFL ties, that he is desiring to find the right fit. So I'm kind of holding my same stance here. I think he's going to leave to the NFL. If I had to place money down today, I think he's going to leave to the NFL. You don't do all this homework, and you don't take all these interviews unless you're actively trying to find that right next job. Now, with that same thing being said, though, there's the contract going on with Michigan. They're trying to put their best offer on the table. And this also, I think, further proves the idea that he's probably headed to the NFL, because when you have all the leverage on a certain place, or in a certain negotiation, rather, on Michigan at this point in time, and I don't mean this in any ill will with Jim Harbaugh having some sort of thought around how he's approaching the Michigan job, but if you're in negotiations and you feel somewhat confident you might be leaving, you can ask for whatever you want. And the headline that came out the other day from Yahoo, I believe it was Dan Wetzel that reported this, there's a couple of things within the Jim Harbaugh contract at Michigan he's asking for that some people are raising their eyebrows at. The first is the delayed start date of his new contract. If he were to sign it, he would want it to be after February 15th. Important for two reasons. One, that would maintain a lower buyout for NFL teams. It dropped from $2.25 million to $1.5 million after January 11th. Michigan wants that buyout closer to $4 million. So that's the first part. The other part of this is that start date for his contract being after February 15th would be after the NFL's hiring cycle. So again, just furthering the thought, rather, that he is trying to keep his options open for the NFL if he finds that right fit. But here's the real thing people got hung up on. Here was the real headline that people stuck to, and punchline culture got ahead of it and started quote tweeting it. Jim Harbaugh wants protection from whatever findings the NCAA turns up within their investigation, from, you know, all the sign stealing stuff and the Connor Stallion saga. Like, he wants to have immunity, that he will not be fired regardless of what they find. And of course, the Twitter fingers got out there from the good folks at opposing fan bases that have an agenda. And they said, well, this just proves that he's guilty. This proves, man, that innocent people, they don't ask for immunity. Well, I hear what you're saying, but my pushback on that would be, I think you do ask for immunity when you don't trust the judge. Like, I have no problem with Jim Harbaugh saying, hey, I want to be protected from whatever the NCAA finds. I don't want to be fired because the NCAA finds X, Y, and Z thing and acts accordingly. Because essentially what I'm reading here is Jim Harbaugh doesn't want to put his fate in the NCAA's hands, that they're going to be reasonable. And I don't think that's unfair. Like, Reggie Bush still does not have his Heisman Trophy. And we got players driving Lamborghinis and getting six-figure NIL deals, and that man still does not have his Heisman Trophy. And we want to trust the NCAA to be reasonable here? Tez Walker's not eligible till like how many weeks into the season? After just a ridiculous, I mean, quite frankly, a fine print kind of thing within the NCAA and the transfer portal. We want to trust them to be reasonable. So for Jim Harbaugh saying, you know what, no, I want myself protected from the NCAA's unreasonableness, I don't think that's wrong to ask for. I would also say this: Jim Harbaugh saying I don't want to be fired from or I don't want to be fired from whatever the NCAA finds from Michigan isn't him saying I'm not guilty. Like I've said this many times on this show. I think Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan staff as a whole probably did some wrongdoing with the Connor Stallions stuff. Whether they knew about it or not, there's probably some amount of wrongdoing that happened there. That's not the discussion. The discussion here for Jim Harbaugh is saying, okay, whatever they find, Michigan, do you have my back? If we get a bowl ban, if we get probation, if we get heavy sanctions, do you have my back? Because if you do, and I sign this, that's me saying I have your back. That's me saying I have your back to be your head coach for X number of years or until he ends up eventually scratching that itch and taking an NFL job. It's not a matter of right versus wrong or guilty versus innocent. It's a matter of, do you have my back? Loyalty between Jim Harbaugh and the powers that be at Michigan. So I don't blame Jim Harbaugh at all. I don't blame Jim Harbaugh. I don't think this says anything about guilty versus not guilty. I understand the thought behind it, but again, it's the NCAA we're dealing with. Would you trust them to be reasonable? Would you trust them to make a decision on your future if your job hung in the balance and you had the leverage? You wouldn't maybe write in something there that says, hey, I'm protected from this unreasonable organization historically? Again, I don't have a problem with it, but I do think Jim Harbaugh in his days in college football, as much as it hurts right here, right in the heart for those of y'all that are listening on podcasts, it hurts, but I think that's the reality here. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.